Welcome back. Stop scrolling for a second, because the story isn't just that silver flashed above triple digits. The story is what that kind of move is accusing the entire money system of. I'm John, and today is not a price to the moon show. This is a structure show. The rules, the incentives, the blind spots. Because when a metal that most people treat like background noise suddenly acts like it's in a hurry, that's not a random headline. That's a signal. And signals deserve a closer look. If you're getting value here, hit subscribe right now and drop OG in the comments. Now, here's the cliffhanger. A lot of investors watch gold. A lot of traders watch silver. But when gold and silver start moving together, and they start moving with urgency, some people see that as a warning light for the dollar itself. Not a dip, not a rough quarter, a warning light. And in a moment, I'm going to ask the question that turns that warning into a timeline. Joining me today is Robert Kiyosaki. You know him from the books, the lessons, the arguments that start fights at dinner tables. He's been loud about one thing for a long time. He doesn't trust fiat money, and he thinks the reset isn't a theory anymore. It's a process. Robert, good to have you here.
Thanks, John. Glad to be with you.
All right, let's start where everyone's eyes went. We saw silver push into triple digits. And to be clear for viewers, there are different prices people see. Spot quotes, futures prints, dealer premiums, coin prices. So when someone says $100 plus dollar silver, some of that is market prints and some of it is retail reality. Either way, it snapped attention. What was your first reaction when you saw it? My first reaction was, finally. And then my second reaction was, people better understand what that's really saying. Okay, unpack that. Because for the average viewer, silver at $100 sounds like a headline for traders. You're saying it's a message. Yeah, it's not just a chart move, it's the system talking. Or maybe more accurately, it's the system being forced to admit something. Forced to admit what? That real things have limits. Paper doesn't, promises don't, but physical inputs do. You're already going to trigger people with that, because they'll say, are you implying there's no silver left? No, I'm not saying the world is empty. I'm saying the world is waking up to the difference between available and needed. That gap matters. And when that gap matters, price stops being polite. All right, so let's go back to your personal timeline because you always anchor this to a lesson you learned early. I started paying attention to silver as a kid. In the mid-1960s, the coinage changed. The money in your hand changed. And a lot of people didn't notice it until it was already done. Right, when the composition changed. Exactly. When you see your money lose the good metal and get replaced with cheaper stuff, you learn a lesson fast. The system will quietly downgrade your savings and call it modernization. And most people will clap because the stamp on the coin still looks official. So you learn to separate official from valuable. Yes, and that's why people hide the good money and spend the bad money. It's not because they're geniuses, it's because they're reacting to incentives. You're basically describing that old principle. Bad money pushes good money out of circulation. That's the idea. The good stuff disappears, the bad stuff multiplies, and the public is told it's normal. Now here's where I want to tighten the lens, because someone watching at home might say, okay, that's history. Why does that matter now? Because the metal changed again, not in the coin, but in the economy. In the industrial age, the dominant metal was iron, steel, infrastructure, machines. You could see it, you could touch it. That was the era. And you're saying we're in a different era now. We are. We're in the information age, the tech era. And silver is one of the key metals that makes that world function. It's in electronics, it's in high-end manufacturing, it's in solar, it's in the stuff people call the future. AI, chips, energy systems, things like that. Yeah. And this is where the conversation gets uncomfortable, because people love to say the future like it's free. It's not free. The future is built out of materials, and materials have supply chains, and supply chains have choke points. So you think silver is a choke point. I think it can be. And when it is, you don't see a slow, gentle adjustment. You see sudden jumps, sudden premiums, and sudden anxiety from buyers who can't just wait it out. Let me push you right there, because you said something critical. Buyers can't just wait it out. The obvious question is, so is there actually not enough silver? Or is this just financial demand creating a spike? Both forces can exist at the same time, but I'll tell you what I think matters. In the information age, the demand isn't just jewelry and coins. It's systems, it's production, it's national security supply chains. It's the stuff that can't be delayed without consequences. So you're making it bigger than investing. Yeah, because if you're a factory manager, you don't care about Twitter arguments. You care about delivery schedules. And if you need metal, you pay the price. You lock contracts. You hoard inventory. You do what you have to do. Okay, so if it's not just a trader spike, what's driving the urgency? The world is electrifying everything. Cars, homes, factories, grids. And AI isn't just software. It's hardware. It's data centers. It's power. It's metals. People act like AI floats in the clouds. It doesn't. It sits on physical infrastructure, and that infrastructure consumes real materials. And your view is that silver is one of those bottleneck materials. I believe it is. And if you think silver is old school, that's the trap. It's not old school. It's one of the quiet foundations of modern tech. Now here's the part where viewers get angry, because they hear foundation and they immediately jump to conspiracy. So I want to be clear. A tight market doesn't automatically mean the whole system is rigged, and a price spike doesn't automatically mean we're out of metal tomorrow. Right. You don't need to turn it into a cartoon. Exactly. Our job is to separate what's structural from what's narrative. So let's do that. When you talk about silver being proof of a broken monetary order, you're not only talking about the metal market, are you? You're talking about the dollar. Yes, because silver is a signal, but the bigger story is the currency system. People think they're watching a commodities chart. I think they're watching a credibility chart. Credibility of what? Credibility of paper money, fiat, the because we said so money. Now you referenced something recently that got a lot of attention. Someone big in the macro world going on TV at a global conference and basically saying the fiat era is done. Whether people agree or not, it was notable that a mainstream voice would even say it. Why do you think people at that level are willing to say that out loud now? Because cycles end. Every currency has a life. It's born, it grows, it gets abused, and then it breaks. Or it gets replaced. That's not politics, that's history. So when you say cycle, what do you mean? Because people hear that and think it's vague. All right, there are debt cycles, short-term cycles where credit expands and contracts. Then there are longer cycles, 75 to 100 years, where the entire structure of a country's debt becomes unsustainable. And then you said there's a third kind of cycle, power cycles, geopolitical cycles. When the center of gravity shifts from one empire to another, the money shifts too. And the United States isn't used to being told no. So in your view, the shift is toward China. That's what I think is happening. And here's the piece that scares people. When power shifts, the leftover paper comes home. The claims come home. The IOUs come home. Walk that through because that's one of your strongest claims. What does paper comes home mean in plain English? It means the world has been holding dollars as reserves, as trade settlement, as savings. If the world decides it doesn't want to hold those dollars anymore, those dollars don't vanish. They return through trade, through markets, through selling. And when they return, you can see domestic prices surge because the supply of currency overwhelms the supply of real goods. So you're not saying inflation is just prices rising. You're describing a confidence event. Yes, it's a trust collapse. And when trust collapses, people run from the paper into something else. Before we go further, I want to pin down that gold and silver together idea because it's one of those lines people repeat without understanding. Historically, gold often leads. It's the asset institutions reach for first when they smell trouble. Silver can lag, and then suddenly sprint. So when you see both climbing at the same time, it can feel like two different groups are reacting at once. Big money hedging with gold, and real-world demand plus smaller speculators pulling silver higher. And that's where the dollar question returns. Because if the public starts treating currency like a melting ice cube, they don't ask, what's the interest rate? They ask, what's safe? Now bring in the central bank. You've argued that when a central bank expands money supply to paper over debt, it quietly reshuffles society. Asset owners benefit first, wages lag, and the people at the bottom feel it as rent stress, food stress, and eventually displacement. You've even linked that pressure to the visible rise of homelessness. I'm not asking viewers to accept that whole chain automatically. I'm saying, watch the incentives. When policy rewards leverage and punishes savers, social tension is not a mystery, it's math. And this is why you keep repeating, the fight is not left versus right. The fight is what the money is, who controls it, and whether it can be diluted without limits. One more cliffhanger here. If the next phase is a bond market accident, rates spiking, governments paying more just to roll old debt, then printing becomes the temptation again. And every time printing becomes the solution, the purchasing power of the currency becomes the sacrificial lamb. That's why you say people shouldn't wait for official confirmation. By the time the evening news admits there's a problem, the repositioning has already happened. So the question isn't if panic arrives, it's whether you've quietly built a plan before it does. Now here's a crucial distinction for the audience. Inflation can be painful, but it's still a world where money works. Hyperinflation is different. Hyperinflation is when money stops being a measuring stick and becomes a hot potato. Exactly. It's when people don't want to hold it even for a weekend. Gold, silver, and crypto, those are your something else. Gold and silver have survived every currency experiment I know. Crypto is newer, but it's built on scarcity and decentralization, and people are hungry for a system that isn't controlled by a central switch. Let's slow down and do a reality check for viewers. You're describing a scenario that sounds extreme. Most people have never lived through anything like it. So when you warn about hyperinflation, what reference point do you use? I use places that already went through it. I was in Zimbabwe during the collapse. And I'm telling you, it changes the psychology of a society fast. It's not academic. It's not a debate. It's survival. What did you actually see? I saw a country flip from normal to madness in a way that shocks you. People behave differently when money stops working. You can't store value. You can't plan. You can't trust prices. Everything becomes a negotiation, and fear moves faster than facts. And you're saying that collapse doesn't wait for everyone to agree?
It doesn't. It arrives like weather. One day you're dry, the next day you're flooded. And in that moment, the people who prepared look lucky, but they're not lucky. They're early. That leads to the practical question. Viewers will ask, if that's even remotely possible, what does a regular person do? I'm not a billionaire. I'm not moving money across borders. What do I do? First, feed your brain the right information. Second, stop saving in a currency that's being printed to death. Third, build assets that produce cash flow. And fourth, hold some real money as insurance. So you're not saying only metals. No, I'm saying metals are part of a bigger plan. People misunderstand me. They think I'm anti-business. I'm pro-cash flow. I'm pro-ownership. I'm anti-being dependent on a system that changes the rules. That's a helpful clarification, because you're famous for teaching cash flow, yet here you are talking about coins and bars.
Right, cash flow is how you live. Real money is how you survive when the cash flow breaks. Now I want to bring this back to silver specifically, because your fans know you've been pounding the table on it. You've said it might be the most explosive speculation of the moment. Why? Because it's small, it's crucial, and it's underappreciated. Gold is the king. Everybody knows it. Central banks buy it. Institutions talk about it. Silver is the thing that gets ignored until it isn't. So you see silver as the surprise lever. Yes, and when it moves violently. That's the nature of thin markets with real-world demand behind them. Let's talk about something viewers don't always understand: premiums. A person hears spot price and thinks that's what they can pay. Then they walk into a shop or click online and they see a different number.
Yeah, because in stress, you pay for immediacy. You pay for physical delivery. You pay for scarcity at the shelf, even if the headline quote hasn't fully caught up. So in your mind, those retail premiums are a type of early warning. They can be, not always. Sometimes it's just retail frenzy. But sometimes it's the market showing you where the pressure is. Okay, but here's the pushback. If silver gets very expensive, won't industry find substitutes? Won't they engineer around it? They'll try. They always try. But the question is, what works at scale, at cost, with reliability? People say substitute like it's a button you press. In manufacturing, it's not that simple. You redesign products, you retool lines, you accept performance trade-offs. That takes time and money. So even the attempt to substitute can create a lag where demand stays high. Exactly. And while that lag exists, the buyers who must have it will pay up.
Now you also tie this to AI and energy. You've said something that makes people uncomfortable, that AI will push unemployment higher. I think automation is going to shock the labor market. People who assume the old job ladder will still exist the same way are going to get hurt. And when people get hurt economically, they get angry politically. And at the same time, you think AI increases physical consumption, metals and power. Right. Data centers don't run on vibes. They run on electricity. That means energy demand. That means grids. That means generators. That means copper, silver, steel, fuel. Whether you're optimistic or pessimistic, the physical bill still arrives. So you're positioning for that. Energy plus metals. Yes, because if the future is more machines doing more work, you need the fuel and the materials.
All right, now let's pivot to crypto, because the audience is split. Some people think crypto is the escape hatch. Some people think it's a casino. Where do you land right now? I like Bitcoin because scarcity matters. There's a cap. You can't print more just because you want to win an election. That's the point. And you'd rather own something with a hard limit than something with a committee. Exactly. Committees change. Incentives change. Scarcity doesn't negotiate. And Ethereum? Ethereum to me is infrastructure. It's the rails. It's the system that can connect things. Tokens, contracts, maybe even assets that are anchored to real stuff someday. People argue about it, but I see it as an important piece of the architecture. Now, critics will say, but crypto is volatile. Gold is stable. How do you think about volatility? Volatility is the price of transition. When a new system is forming, it shakes. That doesn't mean it fails. It means it's growing.
Okay, but let me press you with the viewer's concern. If you're telling someone to protect themselves and you include something that can drop hard, aren't you adding risk? You're adding a different kind of risk, and that's why you size it responsibly. The problem isn't the tool. The problem is people going all in because they want a shortcut. So your advice is don't chase, build a mix. Yes, build a mix that fits your temperament and your life. All right, now I want to ask you something the audience needs to hear because they'll think you're just cheering for higher prices. Do you care what price gold and silver are at day to day? Not really. I'm not trading it like a video game. I count ounces, I accumulate, and I store it away. So your approach is more like insurance than speculation. Yes, it's like a fire extinguisher. You don't buy it because you want a fire. You buy it because you might need it. That's a good analogy, but I'm going to push further. Your own philosophy also talks a lot about cash flow. Businesses, real estate, assets that produce income. Gold and silver don't pay you rent. How do you justify holding them? Because not every asset has the same job. Some assets are for growth, some are for income, some are for protection. Metals are protection. They're there for the moment when the paper promises get questioned. So metals are not a get-rich-quick tool in your view. They're a stay-alive tool.
Exactly. And staying alive financially is underrated. Now, you told me off camera that you think people misunderstand money. They confuse currency with money.
Yes. Currency is what you use because the law and the tax system tell you to use it. Money is what you trust when the law and the tax system lose credibility.
That's a sharp line, and it matters. Because you can be wealthy on paper and poor in reality if your wealth is trapped in a system that's changing.
Okay, but let's talk about something you said that always triggers strong reactions. You've implied the dollar could face a Zimbabwe-style event. Not tomorrow, but sooner than people think. Do you still believe that? I believe we're closer than most people want to admit, and I hope I'm wrong, but I'm positioned as if I'm right. What's your signal that makes you say, closer? When you see the rush into hard assets and when you see precious metals move together, that's when I get that feeling that the smart money is preparing. Now, pause there, because smart money is a phrase people misuse. Sometimes it's just a story people tell to sound confident. What do you mean by it? I mean large players who have access to information, who have lived through cycles, and who know that you don't wait for the headline confirmation, you move before the crowd. So you're saying, by the time the average person agrees, the window is already closing. Exactly. The crowd is always late. That's why the crowd gets punished. Now let's zoom out to the macro chaos, because it's not just metals. You look around and you see debt, deficits, political fights, foreign tensions. Recently we saw major moves in bond markets overseas, yields jumping, bonds dropping. To a lot of people, that sounds technical. To you, it's emotional. It's fear. It's fear and it's math. Bonds are promises. And when investors demand higher yields, they're saying, I trust you less. And when that happens in one region, it can spread. Yes, because money is global now. Stress travels. You used a strong phrase, we're in chaos, because that's what it feels like. You have to manage risk as if things can break. And this is where viewers ask, okay, should I sell everything? Should I hide? No. The goal is not to become paranoid. The goal is to become resilient. There's a difference. So what does resilience look like? It looks like less debt you can't control, more skills you can monetize, more assets you can hold, more flexibility to move, and a mindset that doesn't depend on one perfect outcome. That brings us to something you call state risk. Yes, people talk about country risk, wars, nationalization, capital controls. But in a big country, you can have state-level risk too. Different rules, different taxes, different politics, and you can get blindsided. You've personally been blindsided before, right? Yes, I invested in a gold venture overseas, and I learned the hard way that if a government decides it wants your asset, it can take it. That's not theory, that's experience. So that's why you care where assets are stored and under whose jurisdiction they sit. Exactly. People focus on price. I focus on control. Now let's go to the part of this conversation that makes people uncomfortable, because it's not just economics, it's ideology. You carry around the Communist Manifesto sometimes, and people see that and think it's a stunt. Why do you do that? Because I was taught something when I was young. If you don't understand your opponent's playbook, you'll lose the game. Ideas are weapons, and if you don't study them, you can't defend against them. So you're saying you read it the way you'd study a competitor. Exactly. It's not endorsement, it's reconnaissance. Now, you also connect that book to taxes and property rights. That's a big leap for some viewers. How do you connect those dots? If the state believes it has the right to take more and more of what you own, eventually ownership becomes a suggestion, not a right. People don't feel it at first because it's incremental. They feel it later when it becomes urgent. And you've criticized wealth taxes in that context. Yes, Because when you tax someone's accumulated assets, you're implying those assets are available to be claimed. And if you don't understand that implication, you'll wake up one day and realize the rules changed while you were asleep. To make it concrete, you use examples like art, property, things that aren't cash. Right. Imagine you own something valuable, an artwork, a building, a business. A wealth tax can force liquidation, not because you sold, not because you made income, because you own. That changes behavior. It drives people to move. And you believe we're already seeing that movement. I think you're seeing capital migrate to friendlier places. People follow incentives. That's not political, that's human. Now, critics will say, but taxes fund services. And supporters of taxes will say, the rich should pay. How do you respond without getting lost in the shouting? I respond by asking, what's the incentive structure? If you punish building and reward dependency, what do you get over time? You get less building and more dependency. That's not a moral opinion, that's cause and effect. Now, this is where I want to remind the audience. We're not here to tell you who to vote for. We're here to analyze incentives and risk. And risk isn't just market risk, it's rule risk. Exactly. Okay. Now, some viewers will hear this and say, this is too big, this is too dark. What can I do besides panic? You don't panic. You learn, you prepare, you build skills, you choose your inputs. And that leads to the question I want to ask for the younger viewers. If you're a teenager right now, or you're finishing school, and you're looking at the world and thinking, what am I supposed to study for the next 40 years? What would you tell them? I would tell them, choose your teachers wisely. Because what you put into your head is like what you put into your body. If you eat junk, you get sick. If you consume junk ideas, you get a junk life. That's a powerful metaphor. But people will ask, how do I choose teachers in a world full of noise? Look at outcomes. Who has the life you want? Who has built something real? Who admits mistakes and learns? Follow those people. Now, you're known for saying something that sounds simple but is deep. Schools teach people to fear mistakes. Yes, most systems punish mistakes. But mistakes are how humans learn. A child learns to walk by falling. If you punish falling, you stop walking. That's what happens mentally too. So your investing success, in your view, came from making mistakes, not avoiding them. Absolutely. The biggest learning moments of my life came from things I did wrong. The people who do nothing because they're terrified of being wrong, they never grow. Let's make that practical. Give me an example of a mistake that taught you something valuable. There were times I was broke. There were times I went somewhere thinking it would work and it didn't. I remember being in Vancouver with almost nothing and asking myself, why am I here? And later, I realized it was one of the best things that happened to me, because it forced me to think differently and meet different people. So the mistake turned into a pivot. Yes, and that's why I tell people, don't worship being smart, worship learning. Now I want to circle back to the start because we opened with silver at triple digits, and we've traveled through money, cycles, politics, learning. Let's connect the chain for viewers who are trying to keep up. If someone is watching and thinking, what's the one thing I should take from this? What would you say? I would say, the world is changing. The old money story is not stable. And if you keep doing what the system told you to do, save cash, trust promises, ignore real assets, you're taking a risk you don't understand. So your solution is diversification into real assets and self-education. Yes, and not overdoing it. You don't need to bet your life on one thing. You need a plan that survives multiple scenarios. That's important. Because people hear collapse and they go all in, and then they get wrecked by volatility. Exactly. Don't be reckless. Be prepared. All right, last thing. Let's make this interactive. I want you watching to answer 2 questions in the comments because I read them and it helps us shape the next episode. Question 1. If you had to choose, are you more worried about inflation destroying your savings or automation destroying your income? Question 2. Do you think silver's move is mainly an industrial supply story or mainly a monetary confidence story? Drop your answers below. And if you want more breakdowns like this, structure, signals, not hype, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Robert, appreciate you being here. Thanks, John. Good conversation. All right, stay sharp, stay skeptical, and I'll see you in the next one.